The morning air was crisp as 12-year-old Tyler walked through the front doors of Riverside Middle School. His sneakers squeaked against the polished floors, and he clutched the straps of his backpack a little tighter than necessary. Everything about this place screamed expensive. The walls were freshly painted, the lockers didn't have dents, and the trophy cases gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. His mom had gotten them an apartment on the edge of this district after months of saving. She worked at the county hospital, often pulling back-to-back shifts just to make rent. Tyler knew she wanted better opportunities for him, even if it meant he'd be one of the few kids here who looked like him. He wasn't nervous exactly. Tyler had switched schools before, but each time felt like starting over, like being the new piece in a puzzle where all the other pieces had already figured out where they fit. He kept his head down and followed the flow of students through the hallways, checking his schedule for the third time that morning. By the time third period rolled around, Tyler found himself standing outside the music room. He could hear someone playing scales on a piano inside, the notes crisp and precise. Music had always been his thing. No matter what else was going wrong in his life, he could always count on music to make sense. It was the one constant that followed him from place to place. He stepped inside and immediately spotted the grand piano at the front of the room. It was gorgeous, probably worth more than everything his family owned combined. For just a second, his fingers itched to touch those keys. His grandmother had taught him on an old beat-up upright that was missing 2 keys and had a pedal that stuck. But she'd made magic on that piano, and somehow she'd taught him to do the same. Mrs. Henderson was arranging sheet music on her desk. She was probably in her 50s, wearing a cardigan buttoned all the way up and reading glasses on a beaded chain. When she looked up and saw Tyler standing there, something changed in her face. It was quick, barely noticeable, but he'd learned to recognize that look. "You're the new student," she said. Not a question, just a statement. Her voice had no warmth in it. "Yes, ma'am. Tyler Reed." She glanced at her roster, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Take a seat in the back. We're already several weeks into our curriculum. You'll have to figure out where we are on your own. No welcome. No questions about his experience with music. Just an assignment to the back corner, away from everything and everyone." Tyler nodded and walked to the seat she'd indicated. It was tucked behind a tall filing cabinet, almost like it had been placed there specifically to be forgotten. As other students filtered in, he watched how differently Mrs. Henderson treated them. She smiled at a blonde girl asking about her piano recital over the weekend. She complimented a boy on his practice improvements. When she called roll and reached Tyler's name again, her tone went flat, like she was reading off a grocery list. The lesson started with a slideshow about classical composers. Tyler recognized most of the pieces she played as examples. His grandmother had owned hundreds of old CDs, and she'd made him listen to all of them. She'd tell him stories about each composer, making them come alive like they were old friends of hers. "True musical excellence requires proper training and dedication," Mrs. Henderson said, pausing the presentation. "It's not something that can be improvised. It comes from years of structured learning and the right foundation." Something about the way she said right foundation made Tyler's stomach twist. He couldn't prove she meant anything by it, but the feeling was there anyway. The pattern continued over the next few weeks. Mrs. Henderson had her favorites, and they got all her attention. They practiced on the good instruments. They received challenging pieces to learn. They got actual teaching. Tyler got worksheets, basic stuff about reading notes and counting beats, things he'd mastered when he was 7 years old. He filled them out anyway. No point making waves. His mom had enough to worry about without him causing problems at his new school. Besides, he'd learned a long time ago that sometimes staying quiet was the smarter play. Draw attention to yourself, and you might not like the kind of attention you get. Lunch was the loneliest part of the day. Tyler usually found an empty table near the windows and pulled out his phone. He'd put in his earbuds and lose himself in piano recordings. Rachmaninoff, Chopin, Debussy. The music took him somewhere else, somewhere better. Back to his grandmother's small apartment with the afternoon sun streaming through her curtains and the smell of her cooking filling the air. She'd started teaching him when he was barely tall enough to reach the keys properly. At first, she just let him mess around, finding the notes that sounded good together. But she must have seen something in him because by the time he was 6, they were having real lessons. She was patient but firm. She'd make him play the same measure over and over until his fingers remembered it in their sleep. "Baby, listen," she'd say, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "Anybody can learn to hit the right notes if they practice enough. But that's not what music is about. Music is about feeling. It's about telling a story without words. When you play, I should be able to close my eyes and feel what you're trying to say." He'd understood even at that young age. Music wasn't just technical, it was emotional. It was honest, and somehow, his grandmother had unlocked that ability in him. By the time he was 9, he was playing pieces that made her cry. Good tears, she always said. Proud tears. She'd passed away 8 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and devastating. They'd had to sell her piano to help cover the funeral expenses, and Tyler hadn't touched a real piano since. He practiced in his head, his fingers moving against his desk or his lap, playing pieces from memory. But it wasn't the same. He missed the weight of the keys, the resonance of the sound, the way a good piano seemed to respond to your touch like a living thing. One day after class, Tyler gathered his courage and approached Mrs. Henderson's desk. She was grading papers and didn't look up when he stopped in front of her. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. Finally, she glanced up with raised eyebrows. "Ma'am, I was wondering if maybe I could practice on the piano sometime," Tyler said, keeping his voice respectful. "Maybe before school starts or during lunch? I don't have one at home to practice on." Mrs. Henderson set down her red pen and removed her glasses, letting them hang from the chain. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Cold maybe, dismissive. "The piano is reserved for my advanced students," she said slowly. "They're preparing for the spring recital. That's a privilege earned through demonstrated skill and commitment." "I could work toward the recital too," Tyler offered, hope flickering in his chest despite his better judgment. "I could prepare a piece." She actually smiled then, but it wasn't a kind smile. "The spring recital showcases our most talented students. Perhaps if you apply yourself to the basic materials and show significant improvement, we can discuss it next year." The message was clear. You don't belong here. You're not good enough. Don't waste my time. Tyler nodded and left the room, his throat tight. He'd heard variations of this his whole life. Different words, different situations, but always the same underlying message. He wanted to be angry, but mostly he just felt tired. What Mrs. Henderson didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that Tyler had more musical talent in one hand than most of her advanced students would develop in a lifetime. His grandmother had called him gifted, said she'd never seen a natural ability like his, and soon, very soon, Mrs. Henderson would discover exactly what she'd dismissed. She'd learned that you can't judge someone's worth by looking at them, that real talent doesn't come with a price tag or a zip code. She'd learn it in a way she'd never forget. 3 weeks had passed since Tyler first walked into Mrs. Henderson's music class, and nothing had changed. He still sat in the back corner, still filled out elementary worksheets, still watched from a distance as other students received actual instruction. He'd stopped hoping for things to be different. Hope had a way of making disappointment hurt worse. It was a Wednesday morning when Mrs. Henderson made her announcement. She waited until everyone had settled into their seats, then walked to the front of the room with a stack of papers in her hands. There was something different about her today. She seemed almost excited, which Tyler had learned usually meant bad news for someone. "Class, I have exciting news," she began, her voice louder than usual. "As you know, our annual spring recital is coming up in 6 weeks. This is the most important event of our school year, where we showcase the musical talent of Riverside Middle School." Several students sat up straighter. A girl named Bethany practically bounced in her seat. The spring recital was apparently a big deal. Parents came, the principal attended, and sometimes even local news covered it. For Mrs. Henderson's favorite students, it was their moment to shine. "I've been carefully selecting pieces for each of you," Mrs. Henderson continued, walking between the rows of desks. "I've chosen compositions that will challenge you but also highlight your strengths. This recital reflects not just on you but on this program and this school." She started handing out sheet music. Tyler watched as each student received their assignment. Bethany got a Mozart sonata and actually squealed with delight. A boy named Christopher received a Beethoven piece and high-fived his friend. Mrs. Henderson offered encouragement to each of them, talking about practice schedules and technique tips. Tyler assumed he wouldn't get anything. He figured he'd just sit in the audience like he didn't even belong to the class. That would be fine. Easier, even. No pressure, no spotlight, no chance to mess up. But then Mrs. Henderson was standing in front of his desk. She had one piece of sheet music left in her hands, and she was looking down at him with that same cold smile from his first day. The classroom got quiet. Something about her body language made everyone pay attention. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "I realized I haven't given you an opportunity to participate. That hardly seems fair, does it?" Tyler's stomach dropped. The way she said fair made it clear she didn't mean it. This was something else, something worse. "I think it's only right that you have a chance to perform as well," she continued, placing the sheet music on his desk. "After all, we want to be inclusive, don't we?" He looked down at the paper. His eyes scanned the title and his heart sank even further. It was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2. He knew this piece. It was beautiful, haunting, and incredibly difficult, the kind of piece that advanced students practiced for months to get right. The kind of piece that could make even experienced pianists nervous. "I don't understand," Tyler said quietly, looking up at her. Mrs. Henderson's smile widened. "It's quite simple. You'll perform this piece at the recital, just like everyone else. You have 6 weeks to prepare. That should be plenty of time for someone who wants to be taken seriously." A few students giggled. They understood what was happening, even if Tyler wanted to pretend he didn't. This wasn't an opportunity. This was a setup. She was giving him an impossible task, something designed to make him fail in front of everyone. She wanted to humiliate him, to prove whatever point she'd already decided was true about him. "But I haven't practiced on a piano in months," Tyler said, trying to keep his voice steady, "and I haven't had any real instruction in your class." "Are you refusing?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her eyebrows raised. "Because if you're not serious about music, perhaps you should consider transferring to a different elective. We have standards here. The trap was perfect. If he refused, she'd use it as proof that he wasn't committed, that he didn't belong. If he accepted, she expected him to fail spectacularly, which would prove the same thing in her mind. Either way, she won. Tyler looked down at the sheet music again. The notes swam in front of his eyes. He could hear his grandmother's voice in his head, something she used to say when he was frustrated or scared. "Baby, sometimes people will test you, not to help you grow, but because they want to see you fall. When that happens, you have 2 choices. You can walk away, or you can show them exactly who you are." He took a slow breath and looked back up at Mrs. Henderson. "I'll do it." Her smile faltered for just a second. She'd expected him to back down.
"Wonderful," she said, recovering quickly.
"I look forward to your performance." She walked back to the front of the room, and the whispers started immediately. Tyler heard bits and pieces. "That piece is crazy hard. There's no way he can play that. This is going to be so awkward." He kept his eyes on the sheet music, studying the notes, blocking everything else out. At lunch, Tyler sat at his usual table by the windows. He had the Chopin piece spread out in front of him, his lunch forgotten. His fingers moved silently over the table, practicing the passages, working through the fingering in his mind. He'd played this piece before, actually. His grandmother had taught it to him when he was 10. She'd loved Chopin, said his music had soul. But knowing a piece and performing it were different things, especially after months without touching a real piano. His muscle memory would be rusty. His timing might be off. And he'd be doing it in front of a crowd of people who expected him to fail. A small part of him wondered if he should just tell his mom he wanted to drop the class. She'd let him. She'd understand. But another part of him, the part that sounded like his grandmother, kept pushing back. This wasn't really about the recital. This was about being seen, being heard, being given a chance. Mrs. Henderson had meant this as an insult, but maybe, just maybe, he could turn it into something else. The problem was practice time. He couldn't use the school piano because Mrs. Henderson had made it clear it was off limits. He didn't have money for a keyboard at home. The local library had a piano, but it was only available for an hour at a time, and you had to book it weeks in advance. He'd checked. Over the next few days, Tyler felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. In class, Mrs. Henderson would make little comments. "How's your practicing going, Mr. Reed?" She'd ask in front of everyone, knowing full well he had nowhere to practice. The recital is only 5 weeks away now. Time flies, doesn't it? Other students had started to distance themselves from him. Not in a mean way exactly, but like they didn't want to be associated with what they saw as his inevitable embarrassment. Even the few kids who'd been friendly before started avoiding eye contact. Tyler spent every lunch period with the sheet music, memorizing every measure, every dynamic marking, every subtle shift in tempo. He practiced on his desk, on his lap during bus rides, on the kitchen table while his mom worked night shifts. His fingers moved constantly, building the muscle memory even without a piano to play. One afternoon, a boy named Kevin stopped by his table. "Hey, man," Kevin said, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to say, what she's doing isn't cool." "Everyone knows it." Tyler looked up from his sheet music. "Then why doesn't anyone say anything?" Kevin shifted his weight. "Because she's the teacher. And because—" He trailed off, but Tyler knew what he meant. Because speaking up would mean acknowledging what was really happening. And that made people uncomfortable. "It's fine," Tyler said, even though it wasn't. "I'll figure it out." Kevin nodded and walked away, probably relieved to have the conversation over with. That night, Tyler lay in bed staring at the ceiling. 4.5 weeks until the recital. 4.5 weeks to prepare for the most difficult performance of his life, with no instrument and no support. Mrs. Henderson thought she'd set him up to fail. She thought she'd proven her point before he even played a single note. What she didn't know was that Tyler wasn't doing this for her. He wasn't doing it to prove anything to the other students or even to the school. He was doing it for his grandmother, who'd believed in him when no one else did, who'd taught him that music wasn't about perfection or proving people wrong. It was about truth. And Tyler was about to show everyone a truth that Mrs. Henderson had never wanted to see. The day of the spring recital arrived faster than Tyler expected. 6 weeks had felt like plenty of time when Mrs. Henderson first handed him that sheet music. But now, standing backstage in the school auditorium, it felt like no time at all. His hands were sweating. His heart hammered against his ribs. He could hear the murmur of the crowd gathering in their seats. He'd spent every possible moment preparing. Lunch periods with the sheet music spread in front of him. Late nights practicing finger movements on his kitchen table. Bus rides running through the piece in his mind, measure by measure. He'd even found a piano tutorial app on his phone and practiced with that, though the tiny digital keys were nothing like the real thing. But he hadn't touched an actual piano in 6 weeks. Not once. "You ready?" a voice asked behind him. Tyler turned to see Christopher, one of Mrs. Henderson's star students. He was holding his own sheet music, looking confident and relaxed. He'd probably been practicing on his family's grand piano at home, maybe even taking private lessons to prepare. "I guess I have to be," Tyler said. Christopher looked at him with something like pity. "Look, man, if you're nervous, you could always say you're sick or something. No one would blame you." Tyler understood what he was really saying. Everyone expected him to fail. They'd probably prefer it if he didn't even try. Saved himself the embarrassment. Even this small moment of kindness was wrapped in the assumption that Tyler couldn't pull this off. "I'm good," Tyler said. "But thanks." Christopher shrugged and walked away to join the other students warming up on the practice keyboards backstage. Tyler noticed that none of them had invited him to join. He stood alone in the corner, his hands opening and closing, trying to stay loose. Through the gap in the curtains, he could see the auditorium filling up. Parents with cameras, younger siblings fidgeting in their seats, teachers scattered throughout the crowd. He spotted his mom in the 3rd row, still wearing her scrubs from her shift at the hospital. She'd left work early to be here, probably losing pay she couldn't afford to lose. She caught his eye and gave him a thumbs up, her smile wide and encouraging. That simple gesture steadied him. She believed in him. His grandmother had believed in him. That had to be enough. Mrs. Henderson appeared backstage, clipboard in hand, checking on her students. She moved through the group, offering last-minute advice and encouragement. When she reached Tyler, she paused. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between anticipation and satisfaction. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, making sure only he could hear, "you're performing last. I thought it would be best to end the recital on a memorable note." He knew exactly what she meant. She wanted his failure to be the final impression, the proof of her point delivered right before everyone went home. She'd structured it perfectly. "Whatever you say, Mrs. Henderson," Tyler replied, keeping his voice even. She walked away, and Tyler felt his stomach twist into knots. Last. That meant he'd have to sit through everyone else's performances, watching them succeed, knowing his turn was coming. The anxiety would just build and build. The lights in the auditorium dimmed. Principal Martinez walked onto the stage to welcome everyone and introduce the recital. Tyler found a seat in the wings where he could watch without being seen by the audience. One by one, students performed their pieces. Most of them did well. A few made small mistakes but recovered gracefully. The audience clapped politely after each performance. Bethany played her Mozart sonata with technical precision, though Tyler noticed she rushed through some of the more emotional passages. Christopher's Beethoven was solid, confident. Each performance reminded Tyler of how prepared these students were, how much access they'd had to practice time and instruction. Finally, after what felt like hours, Mrs. Henderson walked back onto the stage. Only Tyler remained backstage. This was it. For our final performance of the evening, Mrs. Henderson announced, her voice carrying through the auditorium, we have Tyler Reed, who will be playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. There was a murmur in the crowd. Some people recognized the piece, understood its difficulty. Tyler heard someone whisper, "That's ambitious." He couldn't tell if they meant it as a compliment or a warning. He walked onto the stage, his legs feeling disconnected from his body. The spotlight was bright, almost blinding. He couldn't see individual faces in the crowd anymore, just shapes and shadows. The grand piano sat center stage waiting. It looked even more intimidating under the lights. Tyler sat down on the bench and adjusted it slightly. The wood was smooth and cool under his hands. He looked out at the blur of the audience and found the spot where he knew his mom was sitting. He couldn't see her clearly, but knowing she was there helped. He glanced to the side and saw Mrs. Henderson standing in the wings, arms crossed, that same cold smile on her face. She was so certain of what was about to happen. She'd probably already composed her speech in her head about how some students just weren't ready for advanced material, how standards mattered. Tyler took a deep breath and placed his hands on the keys. For just a moment, he let himself feel the weight of them, the smooth ivory under his fingertips. It had been so long, too long. His hands trembled slightly. Then he closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. He could almost smell her perfume, hear her voice. "Baby, don't think about the notes. Don't think about the people watching. Just feel the music and let it come through you." He pressed the first key and the note rang out clear and pure through the auditorium. Then the second and the third. The opening measures of the Chopin Nocturne filled the space, delicate and haunting. His fingers remembered. Even after months away from a piano, they remembered. Something shifted inside Tyler. The nervousness fell away. The audience disappeared. Even Mrs. Henderson's presence faded into nothing. There was only the music, only the conversation between his hands and the piano. The weeks of mental practice, the hours of visualization, the muscle memory built on kitchen tables and bus seats, all of it came together. He moved into the more complex passages, his left hand carrying the steady bass line while his right hand danced through the melodic phrases. The Nocturne was known for its expressive rubato, the way it bent and shaped time to serve the emotion of the piece. Tyler understood this instinctively. His grandmother had taught him that Chopin wrote music that sang, that breathed, that lived. He added subtle dynamics, bringing certain phrases forward and letting others recede. His fingers navigated the runs and trills that had looked so intimidating on paper. The middle section built in intensity, the emotions swelling before settling back into the gentle melancholy of the main theme. In the audience, people had stopped shifting in their seats. Parents who'd been checking their phones put them away. Even the younger children sat still, caught up in something they might not have understood but could certainly feel. Mrs. Henderson's smile had vanished. She stood frozen in the wings, her clipboard hanging loose in her hand. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide. This wasn't supposed to be happening. This wasn't what she'd planned. Tyler reached the final phrases of the Nocturne, the music becoming softer, more intimate, like a whispered secret. He played the last delicate notes, letting them ring out in the silence, holding the pedal until the sound faded completely into nothing. For 3 full seconds, the auditorium remained absolutely silent. Tyler opened his eyes, his hands still resting on the keys. He felt strange, like he was coming back from somewhere far away. Then the silence shattered. The audience erupted. People jumped to their feet, applauding, some even shouting. Tyler's mom was crying, her hands pressed to her face. Principal Martinez was clapping so hard it looked like her hands might hurt. Even some of the other students who'd performed earlier were on their feet, their expressions shocked. Tyler stood up from the piano bench slowly, his legs shaky. He looked toward the wings where Mrs. Henderson still stood. Their eyes met across the stage. Her face had gone pale, then flushed red. She looked like someone who'd just had the ground ripped out from under her feet, like every assumption she'd made had just been proven catastrophically wrong. He didn't smile at her, didn't gloat or show any satisfaction. He simply gave a small bow to the audience and walked off stage. As he passed Mrs. Henderson, she opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Tyler kept walking, heading straight for the auditorium doors where his mom would be waiting. Behind him, the applause continued, washing over everything else like a wave that couldn't be stopped. Mrs. Henderson had tried to humiliate him, to break him, to prove he didn't belong. Instead, he'd shown everyone, including himself, exactly what he was capable of, and nothing would ever be the same. Tyler pushed through the auditorium doors and found his mom waiting in the lobby. She grabbed him in a hug so tight he could barely breathe. She was shaking, tears running down her face, and she kept saying, "I'm so proud of you," over and over again. Tyler hugged her back, feeling something crack open in his chest. All the pressure and anxiety of the past 6 weeks came flooding out at once. "You were incredible," she said, pulling back to look at him. "Baby, where did that come from? I knew you were good, but that was something else entirely." "Grandma taught me," Tyler said quietly. "She taught me everything." His mom's eyes filled with fresh tears. "She would have been so proud. Tyler, she would have absolutely lost her mind watching you up there." They stood there for a moment, just the two of them, while other families filed past them into the lobby. Tyler noticed the looks people were giving him. Some were smiling, clearly impressed. Others looked confused, like they were trying to figure out how the kid from the back corner of the music room had just done what he did. A few parents approached to offer congratulations, though their surprise was obvious in their voices. Principal Martinez emerged from the auditorium, moving quickly through the crowd. She was a short woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense air about her. Tyler had only met her once, briefly during his orientation. "Mrs. Reed," she said, extending her hand to Tyler's mom. "I'm Principal Martinez. I just wanted to introduce myself and say that your son's performance was absolutely extraordinary." "Thank you," Tyler's mom said, beaming. "He worked very hard." Principal Martinez turned to Tyler. "I have to be honest with you. I've been at this school for 12 years and I've heard a lot of student recitals. What you just did up there was professional level. Have you had private instruction?" Tyler shook his head. "No, ma'am. My grandmother taught me before she passed away. I haven't really had lessons since then." The principal's eyebrows rose. "You prepared that entire Chopin nocturne without formal lessons or regular access to a piano?" "Yes, ma'am." She exchanged a look with Tyler's mom, something passing between them that Tyler didn't quite understand. "Would you and your mother have time to meet with me in my office tomorrow? I'd like to discuss something with you." Tyler felt a flutter of worry. Was he in trouble somehow? Had he broken some rule he didn't know about? His mom must have seen the concern on his face because she squeezed his shoulder. "Of course, Principal Martinez. What time works for you?" They arranged to meet the next morning before school. Principal Martinez shook both their hands again before being pulled away by other parents wanting to talk about the recital. Tyler and his mom headed home, both of them exhausted but buzzing with leftover adrenaline. That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the performance in his mind, but also thinking about Mrs. Henderson's face. The shock, the disbelief, the way she'd looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Part of him felt satisfied, vindicated, but another part just felt tired. He'd proven himself, but he'd had to work 10 times harder than anyone else in that class just to get the chance. The next morning, Tyler and his mom arrived at school early and were directed to the principal's office. Principal Martinez was already there along with another woman Tyler didn't recognize. She was younger, maybe in her 30s, wearing jeans and a blazer. "Come in, please sit," Principal Martinez said warmly. "This is Dr. Lauren Chen. She's the district's arts coordinator and also teaches at the Madison Conservatory downtown." Tyler's mom shook her hand, looking as confused as Tyler felt. "I asked Dr. Chen to attend the recital last night," Principal Martinez explained. "I try to bring her in a few times a year to see if any of our students might benefit from the conservatory's programs." Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression excited. "Tyler, I have to tell you that your performance last night was remarkable. The technical skill was impressive enough, but what really struck me was your musicality. You didn't just play the notes. You understood the piece on a deeper level. Thank you, Tyler said, unsure where this was going. The Madison Conservatory offers a youth program on weekends and after school, Dr. Chen continued. It's designed for students who show exceptional talent and want to pursue music seriously. We provide advanced instruction, access to practice rooms and instruments, and performance opportunities. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship. The words hung in the air. Tyler looked at his mom, whose hand had moved to cover her mouth. A scholarship? She repeated. What does that include? Everything, Dr. Chen said. Tuition, which is normally quite expensive, but also private lessons, ensemble participation, and access to our facilities whenever he needs them. We have practice rooms available 7 days a week. Tyler felt his heart racing. Access to pianos. Real instruction. The chance to actually develop his skills instead of just surviving on what his grandmother had taught him. It felt too good to be true. There's no cost to you at all, Dr. Chen assured them. The scholarship is merit-based. Tyler earned this through his talent. His mom had tears in her eyes again. She looked at Tyler. Is this something you want, baby? Tyler nodded, not trusting his voice. Then yes, she said to Dr. Chen, absolutely yes. Thank you so much. They spent the next 20 minutes discussing logistics, schedules, and paperwork. Tyler would start the following weekend. He'd have 2 private lessons per week plus ensemble rehearsal. He'd be the youngest student in the advanced program, but Dr. Chen didn't seem concerned about that. As they were wrapping up, Principal Martinez cleared her throat. There's one more thing I need to discuss, though it's a separate matter. Her tone had changed, become more serious. Tyler, would you mind stepping outside for a moment? I need to speak with your mother privately. Tyler went out to the reception area, his stomach knotting up again. Through the closed door, he couldn't hear specific words, but he could tell the conversation was intense. It lasted about 10 minutes. When his mom came out, her expression was hard to read. Angry maybe, but also satisfied somehow. She didn't say anything until they were in the car. Then she turned to him, gripping the steering wheel. Baby, I want you to tell me the truth. How did Mrs. Henderson treat you in her class? Tyler hesitated. He'd never wanted to worry his mom, never wanted to be the kid who complained about unfair treatment. But something about the way she asked made him realize she already knew. Not great, he admitted. She gave me elementary worksheets while everyone else got real instruction. She put me in the back corner away from everything. She wouldn't let me practice on the piano. His mom's jaw tightened. And the recital piece? That was her idea? Yeah, she gave me the hardest piece in the whole recital. I think she expected me to fail. That's what I thought. His mom took a deep breath. Principal Martinez told me that another student came forward after the recital.
Kevin, I think his name was.
He told his parents what happened, how Mrs. Henderson set you up. His parents contacted the school board. Tyler sat up straighter. Kevin did that? Yes, and Principal Martinez started looking into things. She reviewed Mrs. Henderson's class assignments, her grading patterns, how she distributed resources and attention. She found a pattern going back years. You weren't the first student she treated this way, Tyler. You were just the one where it became too obvious to ignore. What's going to happen to her? His mom started the car. She's been placed on administrative leave while they investigate. Depending on what they find, she might face discipline or be asked to retire early. Principal Martinez wanted me to know that she's taking this seriously. She apologized that you had to go through it at all. They drove in silence for a while. Tyler processed everything. The scholarship, the investigation. Kevin speaking up when Tyler had thought everyone was just going to let it slide. It was almost too much to take in. Are you okay? His mom asked. Tyler thought about it. Yeah, he said finally. I think I am. And he meant it. Mrs. Henderson had tried to break him down to prove he didn't belong. But instead, she'd accidentally given him the platform to show everyone exactly what he could do. She'd meant to humiliate him, but she'd ended up exposing her own prejudice instead. The truth had a way of coming out eventually. As they pulled into their apartment complex, Tyler felt something shift inside him. For the first time since his grandmother died, he felt hopeful about the future. He had a real opportunity now, a chance to pursue music seriously. He had people who believed in him. And he'd learned something important about himself. He was stronger than he thought. Mrs. Henderson had underestimated him completely. She'd looked at him and seen someone she could dismiss. She'd been wrong, and now everyone knew it. 3 months passed, and Tyler's life looked completely different than it had before that spring recital. Every Saturday and Tuesday evening, his mom drove him downtown to the Madison Conservatory. The building was old but beautiful, with high ceilings and practice rooms lining long hallways. The sound of piano music, violin scales, and vocal exercises filled the air constantly. It felt like a place where music was taken seriously, where it mattered. His private instructor was a woman named Ms. Patricia, who'd performed professionally for 20 years before deciding to teach. She was demanding but fair, pushing Tyler to refine techniques he didn't even know he'd been doing wrong. She introduced him to composers he'd never heard of, challenged him with pieces that made his fingers ache, and never once made him feel like he didn't belong there. "You have something special," she told him during their 3rd lesson. "Raw talent that most students don't have. But talent alone isn't enough. We're going to build discipline on top of that talent. We're going to turn you into a complete musician." Tyler practiced harder than he ever had in his life. The conservatory gave him a key card so he could access the practice rooms anytime they were open. He'd go in on Sunday afternoons when the building was nearly empty, losing himself for hours at the piano. Sometimes his mom would bring dinner and eat in the hallway outside his practice room, reading a book while he worked through difficult passages over and over again. Back at Riverside Middle School, things had changed too. Mrs. Henderson never returned after her administrative leave. The investigation had uncovered exactly what Principal Martinez suspected: a pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning nearly a decade. Students and parents came forward with their own stories once they realized it was safe to speak up. The school board gave Mrs. Henderson the option to retire quietly or face formal charges. She chose retirement, leaving in mid-April without ever returning to clean out her classroom. A new music teacher arrived to finish out the year, a young man fresh out of college named Mr. Davis. He rearranged the entire classroom on his first day, moving the piano to the center and organizing the seats in a circle around it. "Music is collaborative," he said. "We all face each other. We all participate equally." Tyler found himself actually enjoying music class for the first time all year. Mr. Davis asked him to demonstrate techniques for other students sometimes, treating his skill as an asset to the class rather than something to suppress. Other students started talking to him more, asking him questions about piano, wanting to know about the conservatory. Kevin, the boy who'd spoken up to his parents about what Mrs. Henderson had done, became Tyler's first real friend at Riverside. They ate lunch together, talking about music and video games and normal 7th grade stuff. Kevin played trumpet and was pretty good at it. He started coming to some of Tyler's conservatory performances, always bringing his whole family to cheer from the audience. "Dude, I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner," Kevin told him one day at lunch. "I knew what she was doing wasn't right, but I didn't know how to speak up." "You spoke up when it mattered," Tyler said. "That's what counts." The district implemented changes too. Principal Martinez worked with the school board to develop new policies and training programs. Every teacher had to attend workshops about implicit bias and equitable treatment of students. The district created an anonymous reporting system so students could raise concerns without fear. It wouldn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. In June, the conservatory held its summer showcase. It was a bigger deal than the school recital, held in a real concert hall downtown with professional lighting and acoustics. Tyler was scheduled to perform a piece by Rachmaninoff that he'd been working on for 6 weeks. It was technically challenging but also deeply emotional, the kind of music that required you to pour your heart into it. The night of the performance, Tyler stood backstage in a suit his mom had scraped together money to buy. It was the first time he'd ever worn a suit, and he felt simultaneously grown up and uncomfortable. He could hear the audience filing in, the murmur of hundreds of conversations blending together. Ms. Patricia found him doing breathing exercises in the corner. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Tyler admitted. "But good nervous, I think," she smiled. "Good, a little nervousness keeps you sharp. But remember what we talked about. This isn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. This is about sharing something beautiful with people who want to hear it. Just be present with the music." When his turn came, Tyler walked onto that stage with a confidence he hadn't felt at the school recital. He'd earned his place here. No one had handed him this opportunity as a setup or a joke. He'd worked for it, proven himself, and been recognized for his actual abilities. He sat at the concert grand piano, adjusted the bench, and took a moment to center himself. Then he began to play. The Rachmaninoff flowed from his fingers, powerful and expressive. He'd internalized every note, every phrase, every dynamic shift. This wasn't just technical proficiency anymore. This was artistry. In the third row, his mom watched with tears streaming down her face. Next to her sat Kevin and his parents, along with Principal Martinez, who'd asked if she could attend. Dr. Chen sat further back, smiling with satisfaction at a scholarship well invested. Even Mr. Davis had come, wanting to support his student. When Tyler finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. He stood and bowed, feeling the weight of the moment. This was what his grandmother had wanted for him. Not revenge against people who doubted him, but the simple joy of sharing music with others. The opportunity to develop his gift and see where it could take him. Backstage afterward, Tyler was surrounded by congratulations. Other conservatory students, some of them high schoolers who'd initially been skeptical about such a young kid being in the advanced program, came up to compliment his performance. Parents asked him questions. A local music blogger asked if she could interview him for an article about youth performers in the city. Through it all, Tyler stayed grounded. He was proud of himself, absolutely, but he also understood that this was just the beginning. He had years of work ahead of him if he wanted to pursue music seriously. Talent opened doors, but discipline and dedication kept them open. A few weeks later, Tyler received an email that made him stop in his tracks. It was from a regional youth piano competition scheduled for the fall. Dr. Chen had submitted his name based on his conservatory performances, and he'd been accepted to compete. Winners would receive scholarships to prestigious summer music programs and the chance to perform with the city's symphony orchestra. Tyler called his mom at work to tell her. She put him on speaker so her nurse friends could hear, and they all cheered in the background. "Are you going to do it?" she asked. "Yeah," Tyler said, grinning. "Yeah, I think I am." That evening, Tyler sat at the conservatory's piano in an empty practice room. He wasn't working on anything specific, just playing through pieces he loved, enjoying the feel of the keys under his fingers. He thought about everything that had happened since that first day in Mrs. Henderson's classroom. The isolation, the worksheets, the humiliation she'd planned for him. She'd meant to prove he didn't belong in her world. Instead, she'd accidentally revealed that her world was too small, too limited. Tyler had found a bigger world, one where talent and hard work mattered more than preconceptions and prejudice. A world where a kid from a small apartment with a single mom could sit at a beautiful piano and make music that moved people. His grandmother had been right all along. Music was about truth, and the truth was that Tyler belonged exactly where he was, doing exactly what he was meant to do. He played a few bars of the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had changed everything. It sounded different now, more mature, more refined. He'd grown as a musician and as a person. Mrs. Henderson had tried to hold him back, but she'd only made him stronger. Tyler smiled to himself and began working through scales, warming up for another practice session. He had a competition to prepare for, new pieces to learn, and a future full of possibilities. The past was behind him. The music was ahead, and he was ready for all of it.